Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of 100 Yards Football Sports Talk Radio. I'm your host and producer this afternoon, Logan Landers, and joining me, as always, to break down some tremendous NFL draft prospect. This one being quarterback Spencer Rattler, coming out of the University of South Carolina. As always, Mr. Football, Vincent Turner. How you doing this afternoon, Vincent?
Hey man, how you doing, Mr. Logan Landers?
I'm doing great today, sir. Ready to talk about this elite quarterback coming by way of Phoenix, Arizona with the South Carolina Gamecocks, Spencer Rattler. Got a lot to say about him. It's going to be a great show. But guys, before we get into it, before we break down what we like about this young man, be sure to give us a like, follow, share, and of course, subscribe so you don't miss a single episode here on the channel. We go live each and every single week on Facebook and YouTube. And with the NFL season wrapping up here after the Super Bowl this weekend, we are going to be going very heavy into some draft prospects. So if you want a certain player, a certain team to be covered, put a comment there and we will get to it. We will put it in our bank and we will bring that player up on a future episode. Also, you can check out our podcast available every single week as well, thanks to the Believe Podcast Network. Available on all major podcast streaming platforms. Vincent, let's talk about this young man, Spencer Rattler, a guy who another fellow member of 100 Yards Football has been pointing out. Mr. Daniel Kelly, former NFL draft scout with the New York Jets, also has a great website, firstroundmock.com. Go check it out and read his review on Spencer Rattler. He has him, Vincent, listed as the number one quarterback, QB1, in this draft class. Let's break him down and talk about him, what we like about the young man out of South Carolina. So when you look at Spencer Rattler, he's coming in at 6'1", 218. And I think the stats speak for themselves. When you look at him, obviously we know starting off at Oklahoma, then had that weird situation with Lincoln Riley, Caleb Williams and company, and decided, and that's the thing too that a lot of people don't really point out, Vincent, is he chose to go to South Carolina. And we know that South Carolina hasn't really been a powerhouse per se in college football in the SEC, the tough SEC, when we know he had more than likely his pick of the litter to where he wanted to go, what team he wanted to go to. He said, you know what, I'm going to go down here to South Carolina and I'm just going to work. I'm going to put in some work. And my gosh, did he ever. This past season, 2023, over 3,000 yards through the air, 19 touchdowns, 8 interceptions on a 68.9% completion percentage. That's a career high right there in terms of his percentage. Also threw 3,000 yards in his other season last year at the University of South Carolina. So everyone, whenever he was at Oklahoma, everyone had high expectations for him. And then once he transferred to South Carolina, everyone thought that he was just going to fall off the face of the earth. But Vincent, he put up some great numbers still. Obviously, yes, the interceptions are the one thing you can look at, and the sacks as well. He did get sacked a lot. But sometimes it's just the talent you have on the offensive side might not be as high up as you want it to be, which is for quarterbacks. That's why we sometimes see that they might have a lot of sacks or throw a good bit of interceptions. That might not mean bad plays in terms of how they're throwing the ball. That might just mean because they're trying to run for their lives. We know that Rattler, who got sacked 71 combined times in his 2 seasons at South Carolina, that's not elite offensive line work right there, unfortunately, for that team. But going back to this guy, his individual talent, what he's done, if you look at him, he's got just really good, smooth mechanics. Coming in, once I mentioned, 6'1", 218. He's slender, he's lean, and he can get it done. Like I mentioned, the passing numbers are there also, but he can also run with the legs if he needs to. He ran for 4 touchdowns this past season. 3 of the year prior, ran for over 100 yards this year on the ground. So he can run if need be, but he is by no means I would definitely not call him a dual threat quarterback. He's a guy who is mostly going to stand in the pocket and just absolutely chuck the ball. And he can do so with the best of them. He's got great arm talent. He can throw to anywhere on the field you need him to. If you need a 5-7 yard slant, he can get that with ease. If you need him to throw it for 30 plus, he can get it there too without breaking a sweat. And that's the thing too, is that he's not just going to loft the ball. He throws it with some firepower like he's a baseball player. He's got great velocity on his throws, and it makes it look effortless, like our guy Daniel Kelly says. A tremendous release. DK always talks about that. He's got really good release points as well. He can always create some space with his short burst agility. He's just got smooth mechanics, as I mentioned, an accurate quarterback. We saw that over 68% this past season, 66% the year prior. And we know that he's a guy who we see with a lot of young quarterbacks, and since I've been looking at quarterback prospects being here on the channel, one thing that I see that stands out with him as opposed to other talents, either in this draft class or in previous, is that he's a guy who's not going to just stick his eyes on one receiver. He is actively going through his progressions, looking through his reads, and seeing who the best player is. He's not just saying, all right, this is who I'm going to throw to, forget everyone else. And I think that's kind of what makes Spencer Rattler stand out above a large amount of quarterbacks in this draft class, Vincent, is he's got probably the best arm. He's got that great ability to just, chuck the ball with the best of them. And he's got talent in terms of his ability to read defenses and process which receiver is going to be open. He's not going to lock his eyes on just one guy. Overall, I think Spencer Rattler is a tremendous quarterback. I know a lot of people were dogging on him once he left Oklahoma and said, oh, you're going to go to South Carolina. But Vincent, they said that, but you got to look at the game film like we always do here on the show, and you got to look at what he's done with the talent he has around him. Spencer Rattler is an elite quarterback, and I'm excited to see where this young man's going to end up in the 2024 NFL Draft. Your words on Mr. Rattler, how you think he's going to do at the next level?
Well, I'm going to say this about Spencer Rattler. I respect the young man. The guy's had what I call a up career, down career. Think about this. In 2019, he was the most highly recruited player at the position. He was QB1 in the country of the United States.
Mm-hmm.
Decided to go to Oklahoma, got his turn. In his first year as a starter, he had success, remember? They won the Big 12 championship game. He went on and had an outstanding Cotton Bowl. Then he came back the next season. Had a guy that's breathing over his neck who's now going to be the number one player that's going to be taken in this year's 2024 draft, and Caleb Williams. And then he got benched in the rival game against Texas and never got his job back. And there was rumors coming out of Norman, Oklahoma. He wasn't a good teammate. I never heard that. But I respect him because that was a young man that faced a lot of adversity. Think about it, Logan. He was the number one quarterback in the country. He had a series on Netflix.
Mm-hmm.
We all knew about Spencer Rattler. And then once he got benched in Oklahoma, I heard people on ESPN. One person, I'm going to throw your name out there, Danny Cannell, was kicking him while he was down, saying that, I heard some rumors that he might have been entitled in high school, and that's why things didn't work out at Oklahoma. But what I respect about him, he took his time in deciding the school he's going to transfer to. And he picked South Carolina. And I said, why did he choose South Carolina? A school that's not going to challenge for a championship in the SEC. A school that's trying to be rebuilt under a relatively new head coach in Shane Beamer. But Shane Beamer was assistant on the Oklahoma staff when Spencer Rattler was there. And one thing he said that stuck out in my mind, Logan, he said, the reason I committed to South Carolina and Coach Beamer, because he's been true to me and he's been honest with me. And I want to play for somebody who's been honest to me. Now, you could take that one way or another, but he went to South Carolina. And he had, I'll call, 2 very good seasons. His first year in South Carolina, he kind of struggled. His play was up and down. Didn't have a good game against Georgia that year. But the last 2 games at the end of the season, that's when he put it all together. And one of the things, excuse me, I lost you a little bit. Excuse me, I'm back.
All good, all good.
Excuse me, one of the things, he went up against Tennessee that year. Tennessee came in, still had a chance of playing the college football playoffs. And what did he do that night on ESPN? 30-37, 438 yards, 6 touchdowns. I said, that's the Spencer Rattler that everybody said was going to be a consensus first-round pick. Then he comes back against Clemson the next week, who has got a chance to make the college football playoffs. What does he do that game? On the road against Clemson, he goes 25-39, 360 yards, 2 touchdowns, and 2 interceptions. That's when I said, you know what? this gentleman is going to play at a high level when he get his chance in the National Football League. And really, I thought he was going to come out last year and be in the 2023 NFL draft. But he said, you know what, I'm going to decide to come back and play for Coach Beamer because he gave me commitment. So I'm going to finish what I started here in South Carolina. First game out of the gates against North Carolina, he throws for almost 400 yards, but he sacked 9 times that game. Don't nobody talk about his toughness. Then they played Georgia a couple weeks later in Athens this past season. In that first half, Logan, you can disagree with me if you're not, he was the best player on the field. The best player on the field. Granted, South Carolina didn't win the game, but go back and look at that first half against the University of Georgia. Then last week in the Senior Bowl, everybody was still talking about, well, Spencer Rattler, I don't know. Hey, man, he had this up and down career. He might be a 3rd or 4th round pick. I was saying, what? But he ended up having the best week of any quarterback down there. And he was the most MVP in the game. And he went 4 for 4 for 65 yards and 1 touchdown. I'm going to leave you with this and my final thoughts on the Rattler man, Spencer Rattler. I see him going into the National Football League very simple. His arm is similar to John Elway. He's got that ability to move around in the pocket. If he's a John Elway, you might see a couple of Super Bowl appearances. If he takes a step back, he's going to be the next Andre Ware. But I see him as a John Elway. He's a very confident guy. He's an experienced football player. But one thing you can tell about him, and you can say this, he's had the highs, he's had the lows. He's faced adversity, and when it's all said and done, he's going to be prepared when he gets up there and play at the next level in the National Football League. Spencer Rattler, South Carolina in the house.
Yes, sir. Well said, Mr. Turner. My final thoughts on Spencer Rattler coming out of South Carolina is, as you mentioned, he's a guy who had the highest of highs and the lowest of lows. A guy who's went through a lot in college and is now hoping to come out better on the other side and is hoping to change the face of potential NFL franchise here in just a few months. It's exciting to see where he's going to go. A lot of people are talking about where he could go, what team could draft him. And while he isn't looking to be the number 1 quarterback drafted in this draft class, that doesn't always mean you might not be the best talent. So we'll see what happens, where Spencer Rattler goes, and what franchise could be potentially getting a quarterback to help change the face of that franchise for many years to come. As always, for Mr. Football, Vincent Turner, I've been your host, producer, Logan Landers. Guys, enjoy your weekend. We'll talk to you again on another live episode.